Alright, APUSH family, I think I figured this out finally. The Great Depression and the New Deal. Um, I'm happy because I think this audio is going to work. You're probably depressed because you have to do homework during spring break. So, let's start out with some laughter. Spring break? Not so much. Wah, wah, wah. If this doesn't work, I'm going to follow the alpaca's advice. And I'll alpaca my bags and get the heck out of here. Alright, got some good stuff for you. Here we go. Write it down word for word. Write it down, summarize it. You know the deal. Not the new deal. This is an old deal for notes. Okay, here, you don't have to write this down, but Hoover's, the president here in 1928. We are in America today are nearer to the triumph over poverty than ever before in the history of any land. The poorhouse is vanishing from among us. He couldn't tell the future, but he was dead wrong. Alright, I have no fears for the future of our country. It is bright with hope. This is during his inaugural address when he is made president. This is me after a good lift. Spring break, so I got plenty of time on my hands to hit the gym and express my Second Amendment rights. Alright, the stock market, which we played the day before we left. A bull market is very good. A bear market is not very good. And the bull market of the 20s defined the Roaring 20s, the Jazz Age, in which led to the growth of business. Okay, so American industries flourished during the 20s. There were new technologies. We saw the different products that were made in the 20s. So there was an increase in productivity. There was always something new coming out in which people wanted to buy because it made their life better, because it made them sexier, or whatever. So national income went from 33 million to 79 million, and this led to lots of the wealthy people investing in the stock market. So about 3% of people got involved in the stock market in New York, which led to high optimism and growth. The election of Hoover also had an effect here in the late 20s of people wanting to invest in the stock market. So a tariff on imports, again, the design is to protect U.S. manufacturers. So people got excited about that for U.S. jobs and productivity. The effects it had on the stock market: increased investors' confidence. They know that they're going to get their money back. At least they thought that. The Dow Jones increased 35% before the election. The Dow Jones is a collection of all the major stocks that are exchanged in New York, and so that's an indicator of how well business is doing. Here's the timeline. You don't necessarily have to write this down, but we saw these happen. A few of your groups made money, lots of your groups lost money, but stocks began a steady ascent for about 1.5 years on speculation. Speculation is the hope of what might happen within these businesses. So a lot of people were getting in, making money, getting out, and that's the speculation. Buy low, sell high, look for immediate returns on your profits. October 21st, 1929, a little dip causes concern. On October 23rd, the Dow Jones loses 21 points in an hour. That due to lots of people selling and not buying, and brokers holding on to stocks and no buyers for them. The Dow Jones loses 38 points, 13% of its total on October 28th. And then you have Black Tuesday, October 29th, which the market crashes. This is a chart here of the upswing of the 20s, and then the crash as it hits the bottom and then sort of levels off and stabilizes. Here's your first Hoover meme joke falling for you: faster than the price of the stocks of 1929. It's a pretty good one. You can stop laughing now, and we'll keep writing notes. Causes of the Great Depression. Okay, so the stock market had an impact, there's no doubt, alright? But these other things are leading up towards that, an unequal distribution of wealth and purchasing power. So only people that had wealth were investing in the stock market, which caused some problems. But the unequal distribution here, you have a high number of people that don't have anything, and then you have a low number of people that have a lot. And so this gap between the rich and the poor was widening here. Wages didn't keep up with the prices of goods. So as the 20s went on, and these prices of goods went up, as inflation, supply, and demand um, affected the prices of things, but not necessarily the workers themselves making more money. Bad loans to foreign and individual investors. Everybody's getting loans, so some of these were not good loans for banks, and we'll see how many banks fail here in a minute. Reliance on construction, auto industries. Those are two indicators of growth and jobs back then and even today. So if people were buying houses, construction, that's good for the economy. If people are buying cars, that's good for the economy. Those are big ticket items. Those are loans coming from banks. That's making the economy work in the United States capitalism. When those slow, and that causes people to lose their jobs and causes recessions or depressions. Declining agricultural prices, still farmers struggling to try to stay profitable and make money. So large debt that they're going into because they cannot get stabilization of their prices. So we'll see what changes here on that too. And then buying stocks on margin. I told you about this before we left too, in which there was speculation hoping that prices would continue to rise of stocks. So you buy it one day, it's $50, and in 2 weeks it's 55, and then in 2 weeks it's 60 or 65. And so people bought without real money up front, and they bought 10% down on their stock, and then they would just sell, and then they'd make a little bit of money on that, but they didn't have to put the money up front. Well, when the stock market crashes and when these prices drop, then everybody's in bigger debt. So the effects of the Great Depression: unemployment reaches 25%, 1 in 4 people by 1933. Here is the unemployment chart over the years here. So 1929, 3.2%, which is excellent as far as an unemployment rate. And then you can see the rise reaching its peak in 1933, and then dropping, and we'll see some of the things that the government does create jobs, and then we'll see why it goes back up in 1937, and then kind of leveling off in 1939 before the war starts. The effects of the Great Depression continued, so you got a large number of unemployed people. These people fall into despair. You can't find a job. It doesn't look good. There's no hope. It stresses people out. It causes strain on family. The men feel like failures because they can't provide for their families. The women have to take on more of responsibility, some of them going to work for really low wages to try to make ends meet. These all become problems as far as individuals falling into despair. These would be some examples here of the streets and the signs that people made. Here's another one. He's advertising here as a non-smoker and a non-drinker. These guys are usually well-dressed and well-kept up. They don't look like homeless people as they walk the streets. There's a song here, and I put the YouTube link at the bottom if you want to hear the sound. I can't play the sound for you, but Brother Can You Spare a Dime became an anthem here for the poor and unemployed during the Depression time period. Here's the rest of the lyrics. I won't sing it for you. You're welcome. Okay, more effects of the Great Depression. Family life strain, so I told you about that. You can add that in there too. These are some examples of the photographs of the Depression era, and you can see the conditions in which they lived. Poor family here. They're not camping. Well, I mean, they are camping, but that's how they lived in some places. And some of these places were called Hoovervilles. We'll talk about that in a second. Here's some kids standing in line for some soup. There's Mr. Clarke as he is enjoying his spring break after some barbecue, listen to some tunes, most likely Justin Bieber. Alright, here's how the government responds from the top. President Hoover. It's not the responsibility of the government. That's what he says. It falls on private and local agencies that would care for the poor. This doesn't go over very well with people. We'll see that in the election here in 1932. But before the election, he tries to persuade the public so he can get a re-election. That's not going to happen. Reconstruction Finance Corporation gives the government credit to banks, railroads, insurance companies, try to stimulate the economy. So not direct relief to people, but to big companies that try to get them to create more jobs and get the economy back going. Emergency Relief Act. This one is specific loans to states that can help people. And then a balanced federal budget. If you have a balanced federal budget, you have stability, you know where money's going, you don't have a deficit. So that usually gets foreign investment. The problem with foreign investment at this time is that everybody's suffering from this depression. It's a global depression, not just within the United States. These are the Hoover bills that I mentioned before. So these pop up in all rural, urban areas in which people live in these wood shanty places that are completely run down, that don't have any plumbing, any power. It's just kind of just surviving. People would walk around with their pockets out, showing that they had nothing, and these were called Hoover flags. The bonus army. This is an example of the resistance here and asking for the government to do something to help the situation of many of these people. This is specifically with the Army and those that were involved with World War I. They were promised that they would get a $1,000 bonus, a bond, that would come about in 1945. Okay, so they would have to get to that 1945 age, and then they would get their bonus. So these veterans organize and walk to Washington, march on Washington in 1932, wanting an immediate payment, saying, pay us now, we are not going to make it to 1945, so give us our money immediately. The Senate rejects the House bill to approve this, to give them their money. This is an example of them staying here in Washington to protest. How it ends is interesting. The U.S. Army is brought in to evict all of these veterans from their encampments. Douglas MacArthur, who will be extremely important in the next chapter when we talk about World War II, is leading the current U.S. Army to remove the former U.S. soldiers that fought in World War I, so they don't get their bonus here. This will be on the quiz, the bonus army, you know that. This is another picture here of some of the outcomes of that eviction. Okay, so Roosevelt, he's going to replace Hoover. He's going to win the election of 1932. And here's what he says. I pledge to you, I pledge to myself, a new deal for the American people. Alright, so the New Deal, you got to remember that, and we'll look at the elements of it. Here's a little bit about Franklin Roosevelt, the person. Okay, so he's a distant cousin of Teddy Roosevelt. He is married to Teddy Roosevelt's niece, Eleanor. Yeah, I know. And Kayla Jones, I can't answer your question because this isn't interactive. But yeah, it's Eleanor, not Eeyore. And he becomes president for 12 years and 2 months. He's the longest serving president. And he's paralyzed by polio in 1921. So he's relegated to a wheelchair most of the time. He is never photographed in his wheelchair. I mean, you can find him, but they purposely always propped him up on a podium, used a cane, tried to make sure the cane wasn't in pictures as well. He campaigned from trains and cars, so he was never seen like disabled by the public. But he comes from wealthy parents, and he gets an education and becomes the governor of New York, involved in politics there. Here's another meme. Are you the New Deal? Because, baby, you're helping me through my depression. It's a pretty good one. I say that every time, but they all are very good. Some are better than others, yes. Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay, she revolutionizes the role of the First Lady. So First Ladies before her kind of just, hey, there's the husband's wife. Great. She actively gets involved, and she becomes a resource to her husband as far as what these policies and agendas will be. And she really gets after trying to help the minorities and less fortunate. That's what her main goal is. And she writes a newspaper column called My Day to advocate for the things in which she thought were the most important to change in society. The election results in 1932. An easy victory here for Roosevelt over Hoover, who was the incumbent president. Here's the inaugural address, quite different than what we saw earlier with Hoover's. First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that is a pretty famous quotation from Roosevelt. 3 R's of the New Deal. You got to remember these: relief, recovery, reform. That's a quiz question. That's a test question. That's a kind of overall idea of understanding the New Deal. These New Deal programs will fit into one of these three. Relief, direct money. Okay. Recovery will take different aspects, creating jobs and doing other things. We'll look at those in detail. And then reform is changes in laws mostly, and taxes and things like that. Roosevelt uses what he calls the brains trust, and this is the key people that run these programs and come up with these ideas to get all of the problems fixed for the economy, for society, for domestic policy in the United States. We're not going to talk too much about foreign policy here until the end, because everybody's dealing with this and their own problems. So foreign policy kind of takes a sidetrack here during the 30s until the late 30s, when we realize that Hitler has become a real problem. All right, Frances Perkins is one of these. She is on your quiz as well. She's super important because she is the first woman cabinet member. She's the Secretary of Labor, and she will be a major piece of this New Deal legislation that gets passed. She's going to be the brains behind it. A lot of it, not all of it. John Maynard Keynes. Keynesian economics is a theory here that advocates for a mixed economy instead of a free economy. So a free economy is what we've seen before in the United States, in which the government gets out of the way and businesses do what they want, and that drives the economy. Keynesian economics says there needs to be a mix, and the government's going to get involved and directly get involved. Beyond regulations, they are going to do other things that drive the economy as a part of it, not just a free market, but a mixed part. Okay, so promoting social welfare, public-owned institutions. This is elements of socialism. Okay, so this is going to be a mixture here of socialism, social programs, and capitalism. This gives us what we have today in similar forms, and subsidies supported by population's taxes. So taxes are going to go to other things than just everybody. They're going to go to specific things for specific groups of people. The first 100 days are extremely important for Roosevelt. So this is from March 9th to June 16th, 1933. He's going to get a ton of stuff done, and Congress is going to allow this to happen. They're going to support this, as a majority of the House and the Senate are Democrats. So Prohibition, gone. Amendment 21, 1933, is the repeal of Prohibition. So you can drink. Woohoo! Well, not you guys yet, because you're not 21. So don't do it. Yeah, don't do it. Financial recovery programs. Homeowners Loan Corporation provides financing of small homes to prevent foreclosures. So this means people are going to get money to be dispersed over time, in which they get lower payments so that they can pay their houses instead of banks having to take them back. Same for farmers. Changing the loans in which they have lower interest rates and over a longer period of time, so that they can have some sort of recovery within keeping their farms and not allowing banks to take them back. All right, banks themselves. Banks were a problem. People freaked out. They went into their banks and they asked for their money back. And the banks didn't have it because the banks actively were giving out loans, and they did not keep the reserves of gold and silver for every single person to be able to come in and take it back. Normally, this is not a problem, but at this time, because everybody panicked and was worried about losing their money and didn't have enough money, they went to the banks in large numbers, and banks didn't have their money. So 9,000 banks closed from 1930 to 1933. The president, coming to solve this, uses his executive power, executive order, and declares a bank holiday. All banks close for 4 days. Then the Emergency Banking Act of 1933 follows this. The president is given power over transaction and foreign exchange. This will be a theme that will continue throughout the whole 30s. The federal government will get more power. States will lose power. Individuals will lose within business their power. And the federal government will come to the rescue of society. And the president will have an increase in power throughout this. So within this, Roosevelt closes the banks and then inspects them, not himself, but he sends his inspectors out there, like Inspector Gadget, right? Go Gadget Arms. And they inspect all of the banks and declare the ones safe and fix the ones that aren't and declare them safe. So then the president comes on the radio and he says, look, everybody, we've checked out the banks. They're completely fine. Put your money back in them. And he reassures the American people that the banks are going to be secured and there's no need to take all your money out. So immediately after this, within a month, $1 billion are redeposited into banks. So this stabilizes the banks. The fireside chats are on your quiz. This is a way in which the president continues to use his relationship with the American families through the radio. And about 90% of people had radios, so this was very effective. They didn't have TV, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have other distractions. They did have some, but this was a big deal with the New Deal as the president was coming on to talk about all of his different kinds of deals. All right, the Glass-Steagall Banking Act of 1933 establishes the FDIC. This says we will insure your bank accounts. The government will pay up to $5,000 if there is some sort of problem, if the bank falls apart, if there's a robbery, if something that you invest in the bank fails, the government will pay you that money. And up to today, it's up to $250,000. Does the government have that money? No, but it's nice to know that they'll at least guarantee it, right? Okay, so here's the new deals. Well, here's the 3 R's, right? Relief, recovery, reform. Most of these will fall under relief and recovery that we'll talk about during the first 100 days. Still talking about the first 100 days, okay? All of this he's getting done within the first 100 days as president. The Civilian Conservation Corps, it's on your quiz, CCC, provides jobs for young men 18 to 25. Most of them white, some African Americans, not that many, okay? And these will be jobs all over the country. They'll get paid $30 a month, and 25 of it had to be sent home or had to be saved, so that they didn't just spend it on prostitutes and alcohol, right? Because prohibition's done, so you could buy whatever you want, or gamble it away, right? So the jobs they do: road construction, reforestation, flood control. It doesn't last. It lasts till 1942. It doesn't last till today. Some of these will last till today. A lot of them will go away once the war starts. Here's some of these young men working on clearing the forests. Federal Emergency Relief Administration, 1933. Harry Hopkins, director, one of these brain trust guys, had $250 million direct relief to states. Okay, so this is spread out amongst states, as population, people that need help, given money. Okay, here's money in which you can have to not have to pay back, and you can continue to live. Agricultural Adjustment Administration. This one's on your quiz too, I believe. The AAA. This one is determined unconstitutional. What it does first, for a few years, is establish prices to farmers. So what it says is basically you have to limit the amount of farm land that you use in creating your crops. So it actually pays farmers to not grow things, or it pays farmers to destroy surpluses. Yeah, you heard me right. The AAA was designed to stop production of crops, which then hopefully would stabilize things. Uh, Subsidies were paid by new taxes on this food processing, so farmers got paid here from taxes. It was declared unconstitutional in Butler versus United States. Congress can control commerce, but not production. That was the determination by the Supreme Court. Okay. Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA. This one's still in existence today. What it does is use the rivers here that run through Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee and some of Virginia and North Carolina, that will create power, will create electricity. Okay, so they build dams. The dams are built, and then the power plants are used there to create electricity. So, did you know what the one fish said to the other when they ran into the wall? Damn! Public Works Administration, another one of these brain trust guys Harold likes, provides jobs to stimulate the economy. It's PWA, okay, Public Works. This becomes all kinds of stuff that is used by the public. Roads, schools, post office, bridges, courthouses, all around the country. $4.2 billion given to people to construct these kinds of things. Remember, construction creates jobs, is supposed to be a good indicator of a growth in the economy. Okay, so this is a huge one, the PWA. Are you a part of the TWA? This is in the wrong place, but still good, because damn! Right, TWA, Tennessee Valley Authority, they created dams. Get it? Alright. This is a good damn joke. National Industrial Recovery Act relaxed antitrust laws to allow businesses leaders to confer about standards, production, prices, and wages. Allowed labor unions to bargain collectively and establish minimum wages and maximum hours. This one will be declared unconstitutional as well, and it will be replaced by another one we'll talk about later. But this was the NRA. Here, it helps unions, and we'll see the growth of unions during the 30s. We'll talk about that in a second, too. The National Industrial Recovery Act continued. Here's why it's declared unconstitutional. Schechter versus the United States. Congress cannot regulate intrastate commerce. Okay, so if you remember Munn versus Illinois, it gives the power to the states within themselves, and so this statute unconstitutionally delegated legislative power to the president. Instead, it's supposed to be the states. There you go, unconstitutional. Oh, it's time for a dip in the pool. That Mr. Clarke, after some barbecue on a trip to the gym, you can see I'm having a good spring break. Alright, so now these New Deal first 100 days, the stuff that's passed by Congress, extreme major changes to the economy, to society, with the federal government involved in trying to get people employed. So, the American Liberty Union, League, sorry, period 3, you can laugh at that because you always laugh when I mispronounce things, organized by conservative business leaders in 1934. Okay, so these are going to be the businesses fighting back here against the government control and regulations, the 3 R's. Well, be 4 R's regulation too. Believe that the New Deal was socialistic, an attack on property rights, growing welfare state, and a decline of personal liberty. This is what they were complaining about. You also have criticism for the left that we'll talk about. This guy is from the right, a pastor, a priest, a Catholic radio priest. And he's got a radio show which has a large listening audience. And he criticizes FDR. He says FDR is a tool of special interests, and that he's only doing things to help a certain group of wealthy people. The New Deal is a part of a communist conspiracy. Okay, so communism is a big fear of the United States, and socialism is growing during the 30s. Unions are growing within power. So he creates the National Union for Social Justice, and he talks about all the things wrong with the New Deal on his radio show. And he creates this magazine, and it has a very anti-Jewish theme to it. Okay, and this is, remember, a Catholic priest. So eventually, the Catholic Church pressures him to um, get rid of his show, and his permit was dropped eventually as well. Criticism from the left. So this is people coming from the other side of the Democrat Party that believe that it's not far enough. He's not going into changing or revolutionizing the economy into more of a socialistic way. This would be like Bernie Sanders today. That it's a failing system, and you need to abolish it and completely change the capitalism to socialism. So here's some of the things, examples that we'll look at. Upton Sinclair, remember him? Wrote The Jungle. Yeah. Okay. So Welcome to the Jungle. Axl Rose, not that guy, but Upton Sinclair, The Jungle. He's a writer uh, and advocates for socialism. He was running for governor of California, didn't win, but one of his popular things last year in his run for governor is this idea of paying the elderly people over 60, a pension, and that would come from taxes, and create workshops for unemployed so that they could get skills and education to be able to become employed. But the one that will last here is well, both of them will, but the one that's more significant that we'll talk more about is the pension for older people. So Francis Townsend from Long Beach, whoop whoop, Long Beach, strong beach, um, is a doctor, and he's old, and he wants older people to be protected here. So $200 per month for all over 60. This one's more interesting because it's more complex. It says that these people have to spend all of that $200 within 30 days. So you can't save it. You're getting old, you're going to die, so you got to spend it. And the impact of that would go right back into the economy and create jobs. The money it would come from would be a 2% tax on commercial transactions. So as these old people are getting $200, they're going to spend it, which is going to be taxed, and everybody else that's buying stuff is also going to be taxed as 2%, so it will cover itself. And this has a nationwide following, not just here in California, not locally in Long Beach, but throughout the nation. And what it will influence is the Social Security Act, and it will help get that passed in Congress because of public support. So remember him for your quiz too. Huey Long. If you want extreme, you want Huey Long. If you want Bernie Sanders on steroids, you got Huey Long. He's a senator and former governor from Louisiana. He is not a communist, but he is a socialist. And he comes up with this Share Our Wealth Society. Everybody gets $2,500 for an annual income. Everybody, okay? Adults, not just kids, but like just adults. And if you got a family, then you got $5,000, right? Where it's going to come from is the wealthy. So all fortunes over $5 million get confiscated. You created a $300 million corporation. Sorry, you have $5 million now. And all of that's going to get redistributed to the entire country to pay for all of these people to have an income in which will increase their standard of living. 100% tax on annual income over $1 million. So you make more than $1 million, you got to give whatever it is over $1 million to the government each year. And then the government will redistribute that to those that don't make that much money. It will become that $2,500 annual income. He's assassinated in 1935. There are strong opponents to Huey Long, but you got to remember for your quiz. The second 100 days, okay? So they believe that this has not gone far enough, and advisors propose a left turn, and they still have a majority in the Congress with Democrats, so that's going to help them. The goals are to create jobs, provide Social Security to old people, unemployment insurance, and improve housing conditions so that people have a safe place to live. Here's the Social Security Act, influenced by Dr. Townsend. Payroll tax on employers and workers. That's what's going to pay for it. You retire at 65, it's going to give you a monthly pension. The monthly pensions were starting at $10, and they increase depending on what you contributed here before. It would also include unemployment compensation. So you have unemployment insurance. If you didn't have a job for a certain amount of months, then you would get paid as well. National Labor Relations Act. This is also known as the Wagner Act. It replaces NERA, what was determined as unconstitutional because of Munn versus Illinois before. This guarantees the rights of workers to join or form labor unions and to collectively bargain. This gives power to unions. Alright, so here's what unions do during the 30s. Union membership grows by 4 times. The new one here that becomes extremely important is the Committee for Industrial Organization. CIO is the nickname there. They want groups of workers by industry, not by trade or by craft. They want to include minorities, with blacks and women, and they perform sit-down strikes. And we'll talk about a couple of these here in a second as examples. But the workers just go, and they don't do their work, but they stay inside the building. And this confuses and upsets and frustrates these businesses. And some call on the government for help, some call on the police, some call on their own hiring of militia, if you want, to end these kinds of strikes. So here's some examples. General Motors has a sit-down strike. The result of that is a United Auto Workers Union, and they get what they want. Chicago Steelworkers go on strike. There's a confrontation here between police officers firing into a crowd, which lead to 4 deaths, and this leads to more people joining the CIO. The Fair Labor Standards Act is regulations on interstate commerce. This creates the minimum wage. 25 cents was the first minimum wage in 1933, and this sets the maximum hours of 40 hours per week. If you work more than that, you got time and a half. Child labor restrictions under 16, so you couldn't work a certain number of hours per week. And there's a constitutional case that makes this legal. It's the United States versus Darby Lumber Company, which says that this act is constitutional, overturning a different one during the Progressive era. The Resettlement Act. This is another brain trust guy, Rex Tugwell. It loans money to sharecroppers and small farmers and establishes federal camps for migrant workers to have decent housing. Works Progress Administration, WPA, gives $300 million for unemployed artists and intellectuals. Alright, you might think this is not needed, okay, but this gives to writers and artists, musicians, so that the United States does not lose those kinds of parts of society. Super important to the description of what the United States is going through pictures and literature and music and those kinds of things. So a bunch of money goes to that. Most of the workers, though, built bridges, airports, roads, public buildings. It also provides part-time jobs for high school students and college-age students so that they stay in school, and that would allow them to be more skilled and educated coming into the workforce, hopefully to an economy that will have jobs for them. Federal taxes change. He increases the taxes on wealthy, large money gifts like inheritance and things for children, and anything that was capital gains taxes, which are profits from stocks and other properties in which you might sell. So again, this is going to affect most of the people that have money in the United States, which is a small percent in the 30s. The New Deal, or the Democrat coalition, this will stay from the 30s to the 60s. These are the people that will lead towards the elections that will re-elect men and women, well, not women, men, to political power. We'll see women appointed, but not necessarily elected. Okay, so you got traditional white Southern Democrats, big city politicians, like those political machines we saw before. unions, Midwestern farmers, African Americans. Most of them will be urban northern factory workers, not the southern sharecroppers, but some of southern African Americans will be also. And then Catholic and Jewish immigrants. So minorities here and wage earners are going to be part of this Democrat coalition, but also traditional white southern racists will be part of that too. And then those in the urban machines that used to run the cities themselves. The election of 1936 will be a landslide victory for FDR, as most people felt like things were improving, and the Republican candidate was an alien, Alf. It wasn't really, but this is Alf in the 80s. Alf was a great TV show. You should look it up and watch it on YouTube. I grew up watching Alf. Alright, but Alf Landon was the name of the guy who ran as the Republican and lost quite easily. So there's Alf again. The New Deal for the West. Westerners receive more from the New Deal than any other area per capita. Okay, so this will lead to the Sun Belt, which we'll talk about in the next chapter, or maybe we've already talked about it. I don't know. It's getting late. And the New Deal helps propel the West into the modern era. So a lot of people are going to be moving out west. California is going to be the big benefactor of the New Deal here for the West. The Dust Bowl will also have a major impact on people moving. So all the land there around Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, those areas will be dried up, overused, overfarmed, and these wheat prices will continue to fall, and try to use more land, turn it over faster, and they will be unable to effectively stay farming and make profits. So then the soil dries up through natural ways, and because of these overexhausted lands, because of the adaptations and modifications by farmers, and will make it unsuitable for farming. It just becomes extremely dry. And then the winds come and they blow everything away. So this is the Dust Bowl region here: Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas. And all of these people will lose their farms and have to leave, and most of them will go to California. So Resettlement Administration gives families relief aid. That's that RA that we talked about. These farmers will be resettled, given money to go elsewhere. Most of them will go to California. Most of them will be white, and then that will lead to problems with the Mexican immigrants for farming jobs and land. Here's pictures of the Dust Bowl. Dust was always could be seen all the way up to New York, going to the east. This is showing you everything covered here by all the dirt and soil that's redeposited by the high winds. Okay, so Okies, our term here, refer to not just people from Oklahoma, but around that region that leave this Dust Bowl region and move farther out west, most of them to California. Here's another picture here, families moving. Okay, water. Here's why the resettlement or the settlement of the West is affected here by the New Deal. Provides projects aimed at increasing irrigation of the West. Okay, so bringing water to dry areas. The Boulder Dam, later renamed the Hoover Dam, will take the Colorado River and redirect it here and hold it to create power as well. The Grand Coulee Dam we'll talk about here in a minute as well. But Roosevelt is giving money for these electric power and redirecting the water from rivers in the Rockies and Midwest areas out west. So here's Hoover Dam. I don't know if you've ever been to a dam or not, but here's what they do: is holding back river and slowly releasing it, and then creating power plants, generating electricity from that. So if you go to a dam, you can go on these dam tours, and the best thing to do is ask a bunch of dam questions. It really upsets the the tour guides, and it's pretty damn funny. The American Canal, the All-American Canal, don't want to bust rank on it, but this changes the Colorado River, diverting it into California instead of dripping down into Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. The Grand Coulee Dam. This is a great place to go fishing if you've ever gone fishing up there. But make sure you get the right damn bait, otherwise you won't catch any damn fish. It's extremely hard to do any real good fishing if you don't have the right bait. So make sure you go by the damn souvenir shop and get yourself some damn bait. And they have good halibut, so if you want to just go fishing for the halibut, it's kind of fun. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 reversed allotment provisions of the Dawes Severalty Act. All right, this is the change from the Dawes Severalty Act, which created all the independent lands for Native Americans, and now will reinstate the tribal ownership of land. Okay, but a lot of the Indians are dead by now, so you don't have a large population of them, and now they're going to be given these smaller reservations for tribal ownership, and they'll be given most autonomy, sovereignty to create their own laws, but they will be limited by the federal government in some ways. All right, documentary impulse. This is again going with the act that gives money to artists. So promoting social change, photographers will be given money to go out and show what's happening around the Great Depression. Okay. Here's Dorothy Lang's photographs. Hers are famous. So these are examples of migrant families or Okies, people suffering within these conditions of the Great Depression. Here's some guys can't afford taking the train. They're going to do the long walk. These guys have some trouble. All these are looking for free food. These poor kids. Popular novels of the 30s. Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind. The Grapes of Wrath is specifically about the movement west of these Okies out to California. Movies, gangster films, social disorder, musicals, song and dance are extremely popular. 42nd Street's a big movie, and some comedies as well. The movies of 1939 considered the best year of Hollywood in history. The Wizard of Oz, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Gone with the Wind, and Stagecoach. No, it's not Stagecoach. That is the country western dancing extravaganza. Sorry, Krista. The radio, influx of talent from vaudeville and the recording industry. So you still have this movement that you saw vaudeville performers go to the movies in the 20s, and now you have them going into the radio as well to create these famous shows that would be on the radio, like Amos and Andy, Ma Perkins. So 90% of people had radios in their homes, and they were listening to news and music and sports, and now even an increase here in these radio programs. The king of swing. Swing replaces jazz. It becomes extremely popular with young people, and swing dancing becomes the 30s movement here. Problems for the New Deal. This is a political cartoon showing here why Roosevelt can't build a couple extra wings to the Supreme Court. So he saw his biggest opponents as the Supreme Court blocking his New Deal programs, declaring a couple of them unconstitutional. So what he wanted to do was get rid of the older established justices, or just completely add new people so he could balance out the old justices. So Schechter and Butler rulings were the unconstitutional declarings of the NRA and the AAA. So he wants Congress to expand, going from 9 to 15 for the justices of the Supreme Court. one for every one that was over 70 and that wouldn't retire or die. Many accused FDR of seeking dictatorial powers. So this is one of the problems for FDR, in that he's seen as somebody that's taking too much power, and this really offended people in Congress. Minorities in the New Deal. These are people that don't necessarily get specific protective rights or jobs or things provided for them by the New Deal. So African Americans did get jobs, but they were usually the last hired and first fired, as far as from the AAA or the CCC and these other programs that were the TVA and those kinds of things. Mexican Americans, they are in conflict with migrant farm from Oklahoma going into California. So this will lead to discrimination and racism in the southern parts of the United States. Roosevelt recession causes the unemployment had dropped to 14%. So it goes from 25 in 1933 to 14% in 1937, which is seen in going in the right direction. So they think that things are getting better and that they need to then reduce this deficit spending and come to a more balanced budget. So they try to spend less on the 3 R's, and the Federal Reserve tightens credit on loans and things from the banks. The effects of the recession: stock market collapses again in 1937. Unemployment rises to 20% by 1938, and the Republicans then convince people that, hey, look, this stuff isn't working, so let's move in a different direction, go back to what we had in the 20s, we'll get businesses going again. And so all of these New Deal legislations they're criticizing. And then this isn't a direct thing of the Roosevelt recession, but as the worldwide depression is hitting, Hitler becomes extremely powerful and is consolidating the people of Germany into this fascist regime, and foreign policy becomes more of a concern to try to find out what Hitler is doing and what is going to need to be done to stop him, and then less of a focus on domestic policy in the United States. So foreign policy is going to become a big part of the late 1930s. The legacy of the New Deal: not as racial as critics charged, expanded the role of federal government, so the federal government becomes extremely more powerful in businesses and people's lives and society, especially the presidency with FDR's example. Beginning of the modern welfare state, all of these programs and relief that is created, and it's all because of higher taxes, which increase the federal deficit as they're spending more than they're taking in, trying to get the economy back going. It's Keynesian economics. And eased but not solved the economic depression. So it's still bad, but not as bad maybe as the early 30s. But it's improved a tiny bit. But how long can they continue to do this without it actually making any real changes is what they're pointing here to. Democrats become the majority until the 1960s. So that will be legacies here of the New Deal, and they're still talking about the New Deal today, and we'll see more about it in the next chapter as well. All right, on to chapter 25. Thanks for listening, and more jokes promised in the next one. All right, see you later.